Hi, this is Matt with State of Flex, here to give you a review of Resident Evil. Welcome to Raccoon City. This is the latest cinematic attempt to bring to life the video game franchise Resident Evil to the big screen. All previous attempts, all 6 other films, are completely wiped clean. This is a brand new storyline, a brand new pitched slate of films, and it had me excited. Taking you back about a month and a half ago, I did a summary of the remaining movies week by week I was most excited for. A lot of them prestige films, and there was one kind of outlier that was a little bit weird. That one outlier that was a little bit weird was Resident Evil. But you have to understand, Resident Evil was my video gaming franchise. One of the 2 that I was most interested in that got me into video games. One being Mortal Kombat, the other one a few years later when I started playing story-driven games was Resident Evil. Resident Evil 1 and 2 very specifically. So I was pumped. And besides, the previous attempts to bring Resident Evil to the forefront of cinema were not good. Of those 6 films, 3 of them are virtually unwatchable. 2 of them are almost okay, and 1 of them is passable at best. So, to say I was excited is undercutting it. Especially with a filmmaker who said that this film was inspired by those first 2 games, the ones that introduced me to story-driven games. So, how does this movie fare alongside those other ones? Well, it's better than the unwatchable ones, but not as good as the ones that are almost okay. And that is a bleeding shame. First of all, this movie finds Claire Redfield trying to reach out to her brother, having heard that Umbrella is leaving Raccoon City and starting its company anew elsewhere. Leaving everything behind, she's in contact with this scientist person who is giving her information, so she tries to rescue Chris on the night that it all ends. And that's the basic story. And that's how you get the dynamic team-up of the STARS team going into the Spencer mansion, the Spencer estate, as well as Claire and Leon doing their little business inside the RPD, Raccoon City Police Department, and its adjacent areas. And in capturing the feel of the video games, yeah, it does feel a little more like the video games. The qualities this film has are that it is very atmospheric and utilizes pretty excellent camera work most of the time, especially during the spooky scenes. So that's where the film thrives. And as I say, it captures the look and the tone of the video games pretty well. Where it falls short is literally everywhere else. Yeah, sure, this film adapts partially the first game and partially the second game, but it does an incredibly poor job in doing so, and completely neuters some of these characters. 3 characters in specific really get run down in a almost pathetic way. Those 3 characters are Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy, and Albert Wesker. So I will address some of this, and then I'm going to go into a little bit spoilery territory towards the end of this video. So I'll tell you when you can hit the jump if you don't want any spoilers. Jill Valentine in this movie is tough girl, and that's her entire character. Tough girl. She has nothing besides that. She's tough girl and good with a gun. And that's it. That's her entire character arc. That's everything she has about her. And you don't know what any of her wants are. You just know her name is Jill Valentine. She's good with a gun. That's it. Jill Valentine is my favorite character in the games, so that was a little disheartening. Leon Kennedy, another one of my favorite characters in the games, is sort of fearful of weaponry. He's a rookie that's completely incapable of doing anything, and has no knowledge of how to do anything. And we're talking basic stuff. He is a cop, after all. He's a new cop to this city, but he is a cop, after all, having come from various places. But he's acting as if it's his first day on the job ever with any police force. He's acting like so out of character, it's mind-numbing. Which is too bad. The actor is quite good who plays him. I've never seen this actor before, but he could have been a good choice. He's just not right in any level. And that character is just so ruined. Like, if they were to move forward, and the filmmaker said that if this movie is successful, he hopes to adapt Resident Evil 4, they're incapable of doing that. With the character of Leon Kennedy as presented in this film, cannot move on any further, because that's just not the character. And you need a self-confident character who is knowing and has lived in the world to make that story happen. And it's weird that this storyline is used in this film, because even though Leon Kennedy was a rookie character in the second game, like he was new to the city and whatnot, he still knew what the hell he was doing. He was confused because he comes to a city with zombie apocalypse, but he was still a knowledgeable presence within the city to try to unravel the mystery that needs to be unraveled. Here, he is just like, for want of a better word, I guess the Hudson of this movie, where he's supposed to be like the comic relief character who's just so out of his element that I think that's what they were kind of going for, but it backfires because he seems like he's incompetent, and that shouldn't be. That's not the character. I'll discuss Wesker again in a minute. What I'm going to do right now is pitch a better movie, a more streamlined movie. So, if I were making a Resident Evil game, adapting the first video game, when you're playing the game, you have two choices. You have Chris or Jill. And I think of the two games, I've played them both, Jill's storyline in that is considerably better because of her, the Trinity dynamic of her, Barry, and Wesker. That's a really interesting storyline to play with. This film includes the characters of Jill and Wesker, but does not include the Barry character. So you've taken one of the most interesting and complex elements out of that storyline. If you're going to remove Barry from that situation and not do anything with the Jill character outside of make her tough, why not just take Jill out of it? You clearly want to tell the story with Chris, right? Even though they don't include his side character either. Moving on to Resident Evil 2, which this film also sort of adapts. Resident Evil 2 it gives you two characters. Claire Redfield's storyline, where she's trying to find her brother, or Leon Kennedy's storyline, where he's trying to figure out what the hell is going on in the city. And he keeps coming in contact with Ada Wong. And for all wants and purposes, this film doesn't include her character. So when you remove her character, his storyline isn't as compelling. You should remove his character, and you could have made a streamlined movie that's 90 minutes, that's more concise, using less characters, and make it more dramatically interesting if you just have Claire trying to find her brother in the mansion trying to resolve this mystery. And then you could have the two stories intersect. Which essentially happens in this movie, just with a ton of superfluous material in the middle. It's completely asinine that they didn't just do that direction. And I think the only reason they didn't do that is because, this movie clearly wants you to watch Chris's movie and Claire's movie. They thought fans might be upset if they didn't include, Jill or Leon, because those characters have a lot of, fans. So rather than cut them out of it, they'll just include them, but they'll tweak the characters so that it's more interesting for the filmmaker. But it's going to piss off the fans because neither of those characters reflect the character that they like in the games, who will then go on to carry other games. Doing a Jill, if I were doing this movie, I would have just adapted the first movie, or first game, and do Jill's storyline. Adapt the second one, do Leon's storyline. Cut back, Do Resident Evil 3 and adapt Jill's storyline. Continue Jill's storyline. Do Resident Evil 4, continue Leon's storyline. See what I'm going with there? You had a clear setup of what you could have done. Or if you really wanted to include Resident Evil 1 and 2 together, have those two stories intersect. But whatever, I'm over it. Delving into a little more of the minutiae, a little tiny bit of spoilers here at the end. Jump ahead about a minute if you don't want this. What they do with Wesker is perplexing as hell. Because Wesker is the villain of the first game and of many of them. Wesker is a clear arch threat. And that's revealed as a mystery in the first game and then carries on into others. In this, they start setting that up. In the first act essentially ends with Wesker getting a note on his BlackBerry that the town is going to explode at 6 a.m. the next morning. And then he starts doing shady stuff. Then the movie veers off and starts doing the weirdest thing. They're humanizing Wesker the whole time, not making him an arch-villain, not even having him have the slightest fucking clue of what is happening during the entire events of this film. He's as clueless as everybody else, not involved with anything, mind you. Trying to turn him into a villain, and then too damn afraid to commit to it. And so when he does make his villainous turn, even that isn't all that villainous. And Claire's reaction of he's betrayed us, Jill's reaction of he's betrayed us doesn't make any damn sense because it's not acting like a betrayal. The audience is left perplexed. That is not the character that they're familiar with. And I understand if you try to do a Joker thing or something where you're trying to humanize a character that everybody thinks is this big arch villain and doing something with it, having something to say, maybe that would have worked. But this just seems confusing. It's not the character we're familiar with. They give him way too much humanity and make us want to care for him, and we simply just don't. I don't know. It's asinine what they do with it. End of the spoilers on Wesker. I hated what they did with his character, just because it simply doesn't work. I'm fine if you tweak characters and make them a little bit different or unusual. That's fine. Other movies have done that successfully. I just reviewed Spider-Man 2, where I talk about my love for Dr. Octopus in that movie, and he's completely different than the Dr. Octopus of the comics that I was familiar with well before I ever saw Spider-Man 2. So you can tweak things greatly and still make it work. Iron Man is a character also that is a different, completely different reflection than the Robert Downey Jr. character, yet I liked the Robert Downey Jr. character quite a bit. What they change about Wesker does nothing for the service of this story. It stands just to be confusing, and it doesn't make sense in the narrative that these stories should go with. I liken this movie to two other films. This film feels like... Do you remember the Nightmare on Elm Street remake? There's a couple of visual moments in that Nightmare on Elm Street remake that are direct visual quote lifts from the original source material. So much so that when people point to it, they're like, "Look at how close this is. It's like the same frame. It looks the same." But it lacks the understanding of what that original film was, and that is what this feels like. Sure, this movie does adapt some of the look and specific angles or shots of the first two video games. Pretty successfully, I might add. That was what sold me with the trailer, was how close it looked to those first two games, especially with the shot of the zombie turning its head, the liquor, all that stuff, the dog. It looked like direct lift reveals from the game. But that's all it gave me, was visual quotes. It didn't give me any substance, and it completely didn't understand the substance that was there the first time around. The other movie that I'm going to liken this to is this movie feels exactly like the movie that Robert Rodriguez was parodying or lampooning or whatever you want to call it, sending up with Planet Terror. This is a staunchly serious version of Planet Terror, and that's insane. That movie came out 15 years ago. Grindhouse came out 15 years ago, lampooning a movie that hadn't even come out yet. But this is exactly the movie that he was sending up, and that's fucking insane. I didn't like Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. I don't know if I would watch a sequel to it. It would have to be getting rave reviews for me to enter a theater to watch this story continue. The fact that I'm living now in a world where the remake that's closer to the source material of Resident Evil is inferior to the Paul W.S. Anderson movies that we got circa 2002 is really disappointing. That first Resident Evil, that also tells the origin story of how the zombie apocalypse happens, is okay. It's passable. Its sequel, even though I think was misguided and not good in a lot of parts, captured certain tonal elements that I thought kind of almost worked. The third one is abysmal. The fourth one I think is pretty solid, almost okay. The fifth and sixth one just like descend in quality, and that last one is genuinely unwatchable. This movie stands kind of shoulder to shoulder with like Resident Evil 3 Extinction or whatever it was called. It's not very good, and that's really incredibly disappointing. So yeah, this is one of my biggest disappointments of the year, though that's on me. I don't know why I had expectations for this. I shouldn't have. This is kind of a Titanic situation where like all the signs are there that this is going to be an unmitigated disaster, yet I'm like, I can get a lifeboat. Not true. I did not get a lifeboat. This movie sinks, and it sank me with it. Hit the bell, like, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you liked this movie. I've talked to 2 separate people who gave me glowing reviews of this movie. I want words with them to understand why. But yeah, let me know if this captured your imagination. Thanks for watching. Peace.